the onus to counter anti-Semitism is on non-Jews, like really non-Jews. And so I have actually had a lot of hope over the last couple of years when I've seen young non-Jews and also older non-Jews. In fact, I have several people on my team and who I work with who aren't Jewish, and them taking on the responsibility because they understand that anti-Semitism affects everybody. And it's not just a Jewish problem, it's a societal problem.
Folks, unfortunately it's happening again in plain sight. Synagogues vandalized, Jewish students threatened on campus, embassy staff members trying to help out the Palestinians getting killed. What's going on? Hate speech is becoming mainstream. Anti-Semitism is no longer lurking in the shadows. It is marching through our institutions, emboldened, violent, and disturbingly normalized. And so we're going to cut to the chase. We're going to bring Holly Huffnagle on to talk about the situation. Holly is the Director of Anti-Semitism Policy for the American Jewish Committee, driving the organization's global approach to anti-Semitism policy, strategy, and prevention. Previously, Holly was the U.S. Director for Combating Anti-Semitism, spearheading the agency's response to anti-Semitism in the United States and efforts to better protect the Jewish community. How are you doing today, Holly?
I'm doing well, Greg. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's get right to it. Talk to me about the American Jewish Committee. What is it? What do you do for them? And your role in their efforts to fight anti-Semitism?
So I am the Director of Antisemitism Policy at American Jewish Committee, or AJC, and AJC is a global Jewish advocacy organization. Greg, it was actually one of the oldest in the United States. It was founded in 1906 by a small group or a committee, which is actually why we're called American Jewish Committee, because we were founded by a committee of American Jews, mostly of German origin, who came together in order to try to influence US policy with regards to Russia. In 1906. This was right after there was a wave of persecutions against the Russian Jewish community. Then in Tsarist Russia, there was the Kishinev pogrom in 1903. And this committee, made up of actually really prominent American Jews, people like Cyrus Adler, Jacob Schiff, Louis Marshall, came to the US State Department, and eventually, by 1911, the pressure actually did work, and there was an abrogation of a U.S.-Russian commercial treaty because of the treatment of Russia's Jews. And I think that moment, that starting point in 1906, is still the basis of what we do as an advocacy organization today. We're trying to, enhance the well-being of Jewish communities all over the world, including in the United States. And I have the opportunity to help with that.
All right, so I'm just going to play devil's advocate. I don't think that really there's a problem with anti-Semitism going on in the world right now. Am I right? Am I wrong? Are we overreacting? Is this a temporary blip due to what's going on in Israel, or is this something we need to hunker down on and I don't want to say man up, but get our act together?
It's a legitimate question, and as a historian by training, I really do want to look at the long history of anti-Semitism. We've had anti-Semitism for over 2,000 years, and really in this moment, we're just looking at a current rise, but probably between 2015 and now in the United States, although globally there was a rise even in the early 2000s. We do need to see what we're facing now. And Greg, we are facing a rise in anti-Semitism. We have that in data with incident data, attitudinal data, even perception data of the Jewish community. But that does need to be seen in this long history. And there are times in history that things were much worse for Jewish communities around the world than they are now. And that doesn't mean that we need or abdicate of our responsibility to try to make things better for the Jewish community. So in this moment, the last 5 years especially, AJC has been collecting data on this. As we've seen this uptick, especially in anti-Semitic violence and in the openness of the anti-Semitism, we're trying to push back specifically against that.
All right, so let's talk about you're collecting data and then you're trying to push back. Talk to me about the approach of collecting data. What is that? How does that help? How do you do it? What type of data are you collecting? And why does the AJC believe that that kind of data is going to help with the problem?
We can't just come up with prescriptions and ideas and say, do this, do that, this is going to work. We really do need data-driven advocacy, data-driven policy prescriptions. And so AJC has actually been collecting data and doing research and various surveys for over 100 years. That's all on our website, our archival website, American Jewish Committee Archives. And it actually is fascinating to see the breadth of these studies. But in this moment, we have been collecting data in the form of something called the State of Anti-Semitism in America report. We started this in 2019. This was 1 year after the Tree of Life synagogue massacre in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. And in that year afterwards, we wanted to measure if the American Jewish community was feeling anti-Semitism, was being affected by it, how they were experiencing it. It had been a long time since we had, checked in on the American Jewish community. And so we did that in 2019. In 2020, we surveyed them again, the American Jewish community, except we added a critical component. We did a parallel study of the general population to understand, was what happened in Pittsburgh a wake-up call for the general population? Do they even know what anti-Semitism is? Are they aware? And the differences actually between how American Jews were seeing and perceiving the problem and how the general public was very stark in 2020. And we've done these parallel surveys of both communities every year since 2020. And we still see some differences, but we've noticed in the last 5 years, the general public becoming more aware of the problem, more aware by the increase, even more, kind of more aware of what anti-Semitism is. Many Americans still don't know that term. And so we've been able to track that with the data and then use that data to share with law enforcement, to share with government officials, to share with community leaders as we, go forward in these advocacy efforts.
So to me, it's kind of, I'm almost amazed when you say that the general population is becoming more aware of anti-Semitism. I mean, we had the Holocaust, we've had so many horrific incidents over time, the pogroms, that it's just amazing that there would be a lack of, appreciation or, hey, this is happening. And so what do you attribute the fact that 5, 6 years ago, there was not nearly as much acknowledgement as there is now? Is there something the media is doing? Is it just bad incidents? Is it what the AJC is doing? What do you think is going on?
It's a combination of factors. Unfortunately, we look around and we see all these horrible things happening in the world and issues of safety and gun violence and all of these issues. And we think because we're seeing more of it, that more of it's happening. And we see this in a variety of issues that actually a lot of things are getting better, even if it doesn't look that way, because, we didn't have, full 24/7, 24/7 attention to some of these things like we do now with social media, with the internet, with mainstream media, et cetera. And so, yes, I do think the general public is seeing more of these incidents. It's being reported on. We do ask in our survey, have you seen news reports of anti-Semitism? And many Americans say yes. We've asked Americans if they've seen anti-Semitism themselves. That number's been pretty stable actually over the last few years. It's about 40%, but still 40% of Americans saying that they've witnessed anti-Semitism in the past year. So that's a piece of it. But there are more incidents of anti-Semitism, and we have seen anti-Semitic attitudinal levels rise. We've also noticed an increase in certain communities of people saying that they've seen anti-Semitism or heard it from either friends, family, in the posts that they follow. And so it's yes, there's probably more incident, more attitudes, more reports of it is contributing to more knowledge about the topic itself. We saw a huge spike in knowledge awareness after the Kanye West incident, in the first one in October of 2022. Just the mainstreaming of the issue. People were kind of paying attention to, well, what is this? What's happening? And so we've kind of tracked that as well. But the good news, I say it as a good news, Greg, because I have to somehow look for the positives in this work, is there's more concern about it. So we ask every year, do you think anti-Semitism has increased? And this is for the general public. And last year, when we asked that question, do you think anti-Semitism has increased? About 60% or so of Americans saying, yes, it has. We asked the secondary question of that group. We said, are you concerned by the increase of anti-Semitism? And 88%, almost 9 in 10 US adults in that group said that they were concerned by the increase. And so that's something that we can work with.
All right. So you do the survey, you get these numbers, you see trends. What has what's the next step? Does AJC say basically make a decision or conclusions? Here's what we're seeing. This is what we need to do. And if that's the case, like what is the AJC doing based upon the results that they're getting?
So it depends again on the question. So all the questions, and they're all available on our website, ajc.org. You can see reports all the way back from 2019, 2020, and you can compare. Many of the questions we ask are the same, which is so important because a survey on its own, a standalone survey with no before and no after, isn't actually helpful because we don't actually know if things are getting better or things are getting worse. So for instance, there's been a question that we've been asking for the past several years. We ask it to American Jews. We say, have you changed your behavior out of fear of anti-Semitism in one of these three ways? We ask, have you avoided going someplace that would identify you as being Jewish, like a Jewish institution or synagogue? Have you not worn something? Maybe a kippah or a Magen David necklace. Like, have you not worn something that would identify you as Jewish? Or have you not posted content online that would reveal yourselves as Jewish or your views on Jewish issues? And we've asked this question, each year. And this year, that number was 56% of Americans said that, at least one of those behaviors that they've changed. So over half of American Jews, 56% of American Jews have changed their behavior. That number was 38% just 2 years ago. 38, and that was too much, too many. 38% was too much in 2022. But in 2 year time, we have 56% now. And so what that means for AJC is we're seeing real behavioral shifts in the American Jewish life. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what can we do with this information? And so one of the things from this data point and many other data points we've been working toward is what we call a whole of society approach. What are the sectors of society where Jews are living that can actually impact affect the problem for the better, like actually counter anti-Semitism that we haven't typically engaged before. So this is not the government, this is not law enforcement, this is new sectors of society. Whether it's the media, whether it's private sector, whether it's social media companies, which we engage, but what are other entities of society that can be involved in ensuring that these behavior shifts don't keep happening, that Jews are not afraid to go to synagogue, they're not afraid to wear a Star of David necklace, and so that's the data that's driving our policies at AJC.
All right. So well, let me ask you this. What you're doing the survey to American adults, Jews and non-Jews. Why is there any discussion at AJC about doing the survey to the youth? I mean, presumably they're going to be here longer. They're more amenable to, changing, I guess, their perspective on things. And to me, I worry more about the youth and the older people that are dying out and their hatred hopefully dies out.
And Greg, you have good reason to be worried. Even with the data that we do have, not just from AJC, but others that collect data, whether it's the ADL or other perception data, is there the gap between maybe some of the biases and stereotypes that older generation held against Jews is actually shrinking. So for the longest time, we could almost count on young people to not have those same anti-Semitic stereotypes and beliefs. That gap is lessening because more and more young people believe in conspiracies, about power, control, manipulation. Some of these things are actually part and parcel of anti-Semitism, most likely without realizing that is anti-Semitism, what anti-Semitism is. They don't understand even like that anti-Semitism leads to genocide with the Holocaust. And from our data, even though we don't survey under 18, and maybe one day we could, that you can do that. It's a hard to reach population. You have to go through parameters of the parents, et cetera. But we do oversample young American Jews. So we have a whole oversample of young Jews between the ages of 18 and 29. And we also oversampled young Americans between the ages of 18 and 29. And that is maybe the starkest contrast in all of the other groups,
Yeah.
because young Jews were experiencing anti-Semitism more, being more, changing behavior, seeing it more, experiencing it more, and then their counterparts, their non-Jewish peers, not knowing what it is, So 41% of young Americans, 18 to
Yeah.
29, do not know what anti-Semitism is. Either haven't heard the term, or have heard it, but don't know what it means, and then it's not taken as seriously. And so that's really the challenge of our time.
And I know that the AJC has offices all across the world. I mean, not in every single place, but what about, surveying the Europeans? To me, before I even let you answer this question, I just always historically presumed that anti-Semitism was and is a lot worse in Europe than it is in America. And that's just, from anecdotally and what I read in the papers. But why not interview the Europeans and see what's going on in their minds?
AJC does surveys also in our European offices. So we have offices across Europe. We have an office in Paris, office in Berlin, Warsaw, point people in Rome, we have an office in Brussels. So we do conduct surveys of the experiences of Jews in Europe. Probably one of maybe the most similar surveys that we do is in France. So every couple of years, we'll survey French Jews and the French population, the general population at the same time, to kind of do something similar that we're doing in the United States and see some of these parallels. Because yes, it is absolutely important to see how the problem can compare. You can't compare it directly. It's more maybe like apples and oranges sometimes, but overall, I do still say this, even with the most recent incidents we've had in the United States. Overall, and most historians would agree that the American Jewish experience is different and better than any other place in the diaspora, and that I think something that still holds true. Although we have heard from even French Jews as of a couple months ago that where for some, America still seemed as this kind of promised land, like whether if they needed to leave France because of anti-Semitism, they might go to the UK, but there's been such an uptick in the United Kingdom that maybe they might go to the United States. Um, and that has maybe lessened a little bit. They're starting to question what does it mean to even come to the U.S. anymore as someone who's French, Jewish. So we need to do a better job at lowering our levels of anti-Semitism here in the U.S.
Yeah, so the common denominator from what I see is hate. And it's not just anti-Semitism, there's hate, there's other groups that are targeted and all that. Does AJC basically try to follow what other groups are experienced that are being targeted and to see if there's any parallels, trends, things to learn from efforts to collaborate? How does that go?
Yes, we do. And I think in general, not just AJC, but Jewish community, different organizations can do, we can continue to improve on learning about other groups. And especially in the last year and a half, when I think so many of us within the Jewish community or allies of the Jewish community have felt that there's been a loss of many of our traditional partners. It's still continuing to need to learn about the other. So AJC, even from its inception, was kind of predicated on the fact of being a human relations organization. That in order for Jews to thrive in the United States and around the world, Americans need to thrive. French, like we all need to be thriving in a democracy and being treated equal and not facing discrimination, et cetera. And that mindset has led us to we have an interreligious and intergroup department. We've got offices that focus just on Latino Jewish relations. We've got some on Black Jewish relations, Muslim Jewish relations, in part because of what you just asked, this need to learn about the other communities. And I think some of our best advocacy efforts have actually been in partnership with others. So, for instance, in 2021, there was the passage of the Jabhara Hire No Hate Act. That became a federal law in 2021. And this was a law to help with hate crimes reporting, to offer victim support, to offer training for law enforcement. And this was something that's not only going to help the Jewish community, even though the hate crime statistics just came out this week, and the Jewish community faces about 70%, unfortunately, Greg, of religious bias hate crimes. But other communities can be helped as well.
Yeah.
For instance, we know that anti-Black racism and anti-Black hate crimes was the number one in the racially biased category this year, where Jews were the number one in the religious bias category. And so looking at where others are facing challenges can only help us in some of these common efforts.
Can you change deep-rooted hate? I'm not saying you in general, but so you're doing all this work, you're collecting data, you're doing outreach, you're doing a lot of amazing things, but it's almost like the 800-pound gorilla. Can you move that 800-pound gorilla? Where are we on that? Do you have some success stories? Is there hope? Is there a game plan?
I think many of us have seen the posters. There was a poster in the AJC Los Angeles campus, this where I started my tenure in the Jewish committee. With these children, babies, right, of all different races and ethnicities, and it just says no one is born hating, which is true. No one is born hating. It's taught, it's absorbed, it's etc. There are organizations and entities, especially devoted to de-radicalization, to taking people who are in the far right white supremacists and normalizing them. We saw a lot of this after like the denazification of Germans of German Nazis after World War II and even after 1989 in East Germany. We see this with terrorists. Like there are full organizations working toward the de-radicalization of people with these extremist ideologies, that visceral hate that has poisoned so much of our society. I'm more focused in what I might have control over or can influence, and that's people that have not yet been, they may be on the fence, right? They haven't been radicalized in that way. They're hearing some things, but they're not really sure. They maybe been saying some things that are anti-Semitic, maybe as a joke, but not really understanding that where words can lead. And that's really where, we want to be educating leaders in those communities to affect, positive education about Jews, about anti-Semitism, about actually Jewish history and even its connection to Israel, which is coming up more and more in the last couple of years. So those are more of the groups that I'm focused on. Although it is possible. It's hard. It is possible,
Yeah.
of course, to de-radicalize, but I think the better efforts are probably focused on before people get there.
All right. So I would imagine you're working on the next survey. And is there anything new that you're focused on? Is there anything that you obtained from the last survey or from events that are going on where you're like, wow, we need to really, focus on this question or this group or anything like that?
So we're going to do another survey for 2026, and it's going to be similar in the sense it's going to be capturing some of these trends. But we always ask ourselves each year, what's the need of a survey? You need to have goals. You need to have a reason to keep doing this data. In fact, some survey statisticians and certain survey methodologists will say you don't need to do one every year. And I agree. At some point, we might not want to do a survey every single year. A lot of the data that we collected last year is still very relevant, especially American Jews' experiences on different social media platforms. But in the past year, with everything that's happened, even with our change in government, with whether it be the Trump administration, with different local and state elections, with the unfortunate incident at our event, at AJC's event at the Capitol Jewish Museum, where two of our attendees were murdered in cold blood by a far left extremist. Like this is something that we need to capture. There's also the challenge. And I don't want to call it the normalization of anti-Semitism, but I will say we're seeing this normalization of behavior, right, that allows anti-Semitism to grow, where people are given this free pass because of politics, the war, one's quote unquote values. I put that in quotes because these are kind of perverted values that are allowing people to be anti-Semitic and almost being seen as a badge of justice or something. We haven't really asked questions to capture some of these new changes. And so that's a reason to do the survey again, to get what's new, but to also continue to trend what we've been looking at for the last 7 years.
Yeah. All right. So I want to end this on this question, which is kind of multiple questions. I'm an attorney, so I can never really get that last question out there. In your opinion, is anti-Semitism increasing, decreasing, flatlining? And give me your best take on the future. Like, give me something positive. Leave us with something positive here.
We only know, this sounds like such a simple statement. We only know what we know in the sense that we've only been doing rigorous data collection on anti-Semitism probably over the last 40 years, even less. And it's only improved. Our data collection efforts and the reporting of it has only improved in the last 10 years. in my best knowledge, again, I've been working on anti-Semitism for about 15 years, but I was not working on issues of anti-Semitism in the 1930s in America, in the 1940s. So even my own purview of what's happening is that it is getting worse. This is a season that, or elongated time where anti-Semitism is rising. But we don't actually have that direct apple to apple comparison of the data in U.S. history. We do know that in general, Jews do face a better life here in America, even than they did 100, 150 years ago. So there is this improvement. We have to continue to fight down, fight against some of those prejudices. I think for me, you would ask about something hopeful, something that continues to give me hope is I do, even though I'm working in the policy space, I do work with a lot of young people, Jews and non-Jews. And there's a line that Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs he says, and I frequently use it in my presentations. He says that Jews cannot fight anti-Semitism alone, that the victim cannot cure the crime, the hated can't cure the hate. And I first heard that, I was like, wait, Jews can't fight anti-Semitism alone because the hated can't cure the hate, and the victim can't cure the crime. Why should they have to? And I'm not Jewish, and so when I heard that, I'm like, this is it. The onus to counter anti-Semitism is on non-Jews, like really non-Jews. And so I have actually had a lot of hope over the last couple of years when I've seen young non-Jews and also older non-Jews. In fact, I have several people on my team who I work with who aren't Jewish, and them taking on the responsibility because they understand that anti-Semitism affects everybody. And it's not just a Jewish problem, it's a societal problem. And so that's the step that we're getting toward. It's just unfortunate that that we need to move a little more quickly in this fast-paced world that's kind of pushing back against some of those efforts. But we remain hopeful.
All right, very complicated topic. Did we miss anything you wanted to touch on? I mean, I know that's an impossible question to answer, but
I actually I'm going to say one more thing.
yeah.
I think this is something that I've seen as anti-Semitism is rising, and we have all the reasons that we can talk about for why it's been rising over the last 10 years, and none of them justify it, but there are reasons. But one thing that I've also noticed in parallel with rising anti-Semitism has been an increase in the fraying of our social fabric, and there's like this lack of trust that we have in others. And I ask myself this, like, am I with more people who think like me, who act like me, than I was 10 years ago? I encourage everyone to ask that. I think sometimes especially since COVID, when we were all kind of isolated and that it's almost more fun. It's easy just to be in spaces where you're thinking like the other, and it makes things maybe life more enjoyable. But easy is not the best. And easy doesn't necessarily help us in the long term. And something that has been really affecting me in the last couple of years is just learning how distrustful that we've become as a society. Like there's actual statistics that just show the level of trust dropping completely. That Americans mostly don't trust others anymore. There's been a quadrupling of Americans who say they don't have any close friends. More and more Americans say that they're lonely. And Greg, we actually have data that shows that if people who are lonely are 7 times more likely to be involved in politics than non-lonely people. And loneliness needs this meanness, this distrust. And so for me, like anti-Semitism, which at its core is distrust, it is envy, it's resentment, it's conspiracy, is rising at the same time as there's this distrust in other people, as some of our institutions that have historically held us together, whether it's church or synagogue or the YMCA or other civic engagement, have fallen. Like we have to refocus on like just the trust building at the local level with other people. And in this day of quick wins, where everyone wants to put something on social media, you want a glossy bill, you want an executive order, that's actually not going to fix the societal tensions that are where anti-Semitism is growing. And so that's the challenge, I think, for us, is how do we do some of that high level stuff? Well, really, it's the foundation that needs to be worked on the most. And so my biggest encouragement is continuing to befriend people who think differently than us, who look differently, who think differently, even on Israel, especially right now. That's the only way we'll kind of fix that loss of trust that we've seen over the last 10 plus years.
All right, that's wonderful because I was actually going to ask you at the end of these podcasts. I always do a call to action, and I'm going to say this. Everybody, if you're out there listening to this and you want others to hear about anti-Semitism, maybe your friends and family don't even know what's going on, please share this episode. But that was a very good call to action on your part to end this episode. So that's Holly Huffnagle from the American Jewish Community doing amazing work fighting anti-Semitism. There is no place for hate, folks. It doesn't help. Maybe it makes you feel better, but it really doesn't help the equation. All right. So, Holly, thank you for joining us today. And I guess I'll see you at the next retreat.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. That'll do for this episode of Cut to the Chase. Again, share this episode. Subscribe, rate, review if you want. Questions, comments. Holly is, if somebody's like, I want to reach out to Holly, I've got some information or whatever, breaking, anti-Semitism, what's the best thing for them to do?
We've made it very easy. It's just the word anti-Semitism at ajc.org. You can email antisemitism@ajc.org. And our website, ajc.org, also has a whole host of resources on how to understand, respond to, and prevent anti-Semitism.
All right, there you go, folks. You could call that if you see something, say something. And that's how you're going to do it. All right, Holly, go back to work. You got a lot to do, all right?
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.